If you don't feel like you know me that well, I think I have a solution. I'm going to tell you about two of my scars. The first one is this one on the back of my leg that I got when I was hiking to a fishing spot in the river with my dad. And I had a run-in with some barbed wire. I'll show you this one on my arm, where I was bit by my neighbor's dog this summer. Cool. When we finally meet again in person, you can show me some of yours if you want. Okay, I'm going to take this nice and slow, like I'm on NPR. And I know for certain that no one will interrupt me. As a Native woman, being alive is an act of resistance. My life is an act of resistance. I've been fighting for my survival since I was in utero, and the copper IUD that was supposed to prevent me from being failed. Preaching this sermon today is an act of resistance. So I'd like to thank Rev. Christine for the opportunity to share a bit of myself with you today. A lot of you know me, and some of you don't. I assume most of you like me, but I'm sure some of you don't. Be that as it may, I have the pulpit today because the congregation decided that today should be the day a Native American, Aboriginal, Indigenous, Indian gets to hold court. So here I am, with the weight of countless generations on my back and by my side. The weight that folks carry if they know their importance to their community, to those who understand the responsibility of representing something larger than yourself. But here's the thing. I struggled with what to talk about today because there are so many things Native people face. I wasn't sure what to focus on. I'm not an expert and could not do justice to most issues facing Indian country today. Most of all, my expertise is experiential. So what does that mean? I don't want to gloss over anything that deserves to be lifted, but I'm also not here to educate all of you on the details of the plethora of Indigenous hardships. So I'm going to read a short list. I call it my stoic list of crap. It consists of issues and struggles affecting Indian country, all sad, all depressing, all things that add weight to the daily lives of Indigenous people, and all very, very easy to Google. Missing and murdered Indigenous women. Violence against women. Native American boarding schools. Indian mascots. Cultural exploitation. Lack of health equity. Food sovereignty. Food scarcity. Voting rights violations. Exploitation of natural resources. Water rights. Cultural erasure. Housing inequality. Poverty and unemployment. And suicide. I will not put this list in the chat. If you need it, you can rewatch the sermon online. So here we go. Tokoa heokona poihu nachataiha pam chekeone. Hi everybody. My name is Elena Perez. Most of you know me as Len. I live in northern New Mexico in the Pueblo of Picaries, a reservation that is also the ancestral home of my family on my father's mother's side. My roots here are deep, like pre-colonial Spanish deep, or like older than Jesus deep. But I look white, and I look white for the same reason I'm predisposed to diabetes. Genetics. My mother is white, or as someone once described her, Euro-ethnic. That's a nice way to say she's a mutt. Irish, Scottish, English, Danish. She was raised Irish Catholic, one of 11, born in Rochester, New York. My dad, on the other hand, is an FBI, or full-blooded Indian. His father was from Coche de Pueblo. His mother, a boarding school survivor from the Santa Fe Indian School, was from Picaris. Why am I telling you all of this? I think it's a way to heal my little biracial heart a bit. My parents have been married for 50 plus years. They met at my Uncle James's baseball game down in Coche de Pueblo. They fell in love instantly, have been together ever since. But I struggled a lot being light-skinned. I didn't know it was really a thing until I went to the Santa Fe Indian School. Yes, that same Indian school my grandmother was forced to attend. They had since been revamped and was now run by the Pueblos of New Mexico, so no abuse, no assimilation, and no trauma other than normal teenage angst. Anyway, that was the first place I truly understood what it meant to identify as a Pueblo. To attend the school, you have to be part of a federally recognized tribe, and because the location of the school was majority Pueblo, with a few Navajo sprinkled in. I was a city Indian who only visited the res on major holidays and to go fishing. So what did I know about res life? Nothing. I only knew what I heard, and most of it was negative. There's nothing to do. There's problems with drugs and alcohol. Res kids are rough. In some ways, they were right. Res kids are rough. But they're also kind, thoughtful, funny, smart, creative individuals. People who have a wealth of knowledge from their cultural upbringing. And that is something I didn't have. I didn't know res life. I didn't know Pueblo life. I didn't know what it meant to have grandmas and aunties who would only talk to you in Indian. I didn't know what it was like to live within my community. And I didn't know what it was like to have an uncle that was 10 years younger than me. I tried my best to integrate, though, participating in traditional dances and language classes. I would stay at my friends' houses and hang out with their grandmas. I began to feel connected in a way I never had before. There was so much more to this identity now. So much that I just didn't have exposure to yet. But I became comfortable, content, and happy with where I was. It would be enough to carry me through the next decade. Now we're going to fast forward here just a little bit. Past my super student days as senior class president, salutatorian, and athlete of the year. We're going to pass by my days as a manic, depressive, alcoholic Ivy Leaguer, which was quickly followed by my diagnosis of anxiety and depression. We're going to skate past me moving to Arizona, which was a very big deal. Pueblos hardly ever leave New Mexico. Somewhere in there I got married, I graduated from college, and bought a house. So we're going to land somewhere around 10 years ago in Phoenix, where I can talk about being completely disconnected from my native identity and spiritual life. I can talk about finding a spiritual home at UUCP and feeling the call towards action as a water protector. How that tied me to the larger Indigenous community and reminded me what my soul was missing, which was connection to home. Now, I love Phoenix. I love my house in Phoenix. I love my community in Phoenix. But I never quite feel whole. I started visiting home in New Mexico for my mental stability about 10 years ago. If I went any significant length of time without seeing my folks and my family, I would start to lose my sense of self. It was not good. I didn't have any native friends here, which was a real problem. But I powered through, not the best option, and life kept happening. We fostered then adopted children. My mother-in-law came to live with us. We started attending UUCP. UUCP became a place of refuge. There were at least 2 Indians there, right? Maybe more. This could work, I thought. We dove in headfirst into church life. Rev Susan became my hero, and Katie became the director of children's ministries. Then our community started solidifying. Our acquaintances became friends, our friends became family, and I came one step closer to feeling whole. Then came the call. Standing Rock started gaining traction in the media. There was a call for water protectors to gather in North Dakota to help stop the Dakota Access Pipeline. I felt a pull from deep in my belly, like this is something I had to do. With the support of my wife and the help of UUCP, I packed up Emers's old Subaru, grabbed a navigator and travel companion, my dog Ruby, and headed north with no real understanding of where I was going, just that I had to be there. We meandered our way north. Nico Case sang us through the fields. We got to the casino near the encampment on a windy, cold October night. I needed sleep before I drove any farther, and I didn't want to roll into camp at 2 a.m. The next morning we woke up to a different world than we started in. I used the casino facilities, walked Ruby a bit, ate breakfast from our cooler, then strapped in to find our final destination. Standing Rock was magic. It was all the things rolled into one. It was an Indigenous community. It was a spiritual home. It was a place of active resistance and a place of survival. The road into camp was lined with signs of solidarity flags and many, many nations that were being represented. I loved being there. It fed a place in myself that I had been neglecting. My need to be among other Indigenous people. It fed my call to resistance, and I could resist by just existing in that space. My presence was powerful and feared. It was wonderful. Standing Rock renewed my sense of self. I lost my flashlight, I lost the Subaru, and I lost my deep-rooted fear that I wasn't Indigenous enough. When my time there was done, I came back to Phoenix a renewed person, having a deeper understanding of what fed me. The trick was, what did I do with this new information? So the buzz from Standing Rock would carry me for years, giving me the courage to participate in community gatherings as an Indigenous person, a space where I previously was not comfortable. It helped me reconnect with cousins and friends from back home. It renewed my spirit of active resistance and boosted my participation in social justice movements in Phoenix. I was finally starting to feel like me. So we're going to fast forward again, past the time when Rev Susan left and our lives changed. Suddenly the church didn't seem so welcoming a place. The stability we'd had in our community and our livelihood was starting to slip away. It was a hard time for us to function. We were stressed and worn thin. And our community was still there and still fighting, but it was harder to find time to be in that sacred communal space. Then came Rev Christine, thank the goddesses, and it seemed like our minds could rest a little easier, or so we thought. The pandemic was coming. It was on the other side of the world, but we knew it would get here soon enough. We made the incredibly hard decision to leave Phoenix, a densely populated, soon-to-be dangerous area, and headed for the mountains to my family's house on the reservation. A community with a population of 154. A community that understood the potentially devastating effect of a pandemic. One wave of coronavirus could knock out our entire tribe. It could mean the end of generations, loss of cultural knowledge, loss of traditional language, loss of everything sacred. We felt safe there in a very controlled environment where most everyone took COVID as seriously as we did. It took a lot of adjusting to res life. Like I was warned, there was nothing to do. Especially with the pandemic, all regular traditional doings were canceled. So homesteading was all we did. Thankfully, Katie was able to continue working remotely, but that was tricky at first since we had no internet yet, and the closest internet was at my uncle's house, my same Uncle James, that had no running water. We managed though and finally got things squared away. Internet on the res is a trip. It's something I never really thought I would see. It was amazing enough when Pickeries finally was able to get cell service. It's still spotty as hell, but it's pretty good. Better than nothing. So living in the Pueblo was a dream I thought would never come to fruition. I could have never guessed that these would be the circumstances, but here I am. And suddenly, I had got that old familiar feeling of not being enough. My neighbors live here full time. They speak the language. Well, some of them do. They participate in the traditions. Most of them do. And they all knew each other. But did they know me? Did I know them? Did they at least know my father? It took some time, but eventually I understood that, yes, they did know me. Those who didn't know me knew at least one of my parents. It wasn't a question to anyone whether or not I belonged here. Of course I did. I was reminded of a dream I had when I was a teen. My great-aunt Frances had passed away, and that night she came to me and told me that I would always be Pickeries in my heart. And her daughter Kay, my next-door neighbor, reiterated that sentiment. She told me, "Of course you belong here. You're Pickeries. Anyone who tells you differently, just ignore them. We know the truth." I knew the truth, but I had a lot of trouble believing it. But that would change over time. And who knew I would have plenty of time. I heard the call to Minnesota to stop Line 3, first from Katie, then from Janine, the executive director of UU Jazz. I had been invited to help stop Line 3, an invitation I somewhat reluctantly accepted. But once I did, all the pieces started falling into place. There was no question that this was what I was supposed to be doing right now, at this moment. I packed up Virgil and headed north to meet Kia, my new cousin and travel companion, which you all heard from for Together Time, so I won't go into that. Which brings us to today. I've now lived on the res for 18 months. I have a job with the tribe. I help run and participate in language classes. I have a res dog, which is a social creature with no fence line or sense of decorum that likes to lay on, pee on, and chase cars. And I have a res car, Virgil, who you met earlier. Well, a van, actually. She hasn't been washed in 18 months because there's no point. She gets dusty on all the dirt roads. Her shocks are blown. She's got a giant crack across the windshield. She has the goo of old bumper stickers all over her rear. People can hear her coming a mile away because the splash shield underneath is dragging. But she's a good pony. She can fit 12 Indians easily and 90 loaves of oven bread. Her engine is still good, and she still starts every time. And she still gets me around. In this pandemic now, I feel more connected to Pickeries than I ever have before. This is my spiritual home. These are the people that will take care of me when I die. My final resting place is here. But, like Cornel West says, it's from the womb to the tomb. The question is, what are you going to do in the meantime? So, what am I going to do in the meantime? I have to figure that out. I'm tasked with balancing two worlds, my home here and my home in Phoenix. I love you all so much, it's hard to know where to keep all the parts of myself whole. Does that make sense? The truth is, there is no easy solution. I can't be in two places at once, and neither place will make me feel whole on its own. And that's where I have to leave it. So that's a little bit of my story. Thank you for staying with me. You've earned your Indian badge for the day. If you want extra credit, you can use your Google machine to look up any of the previously mentioned issues. If that's too depressing, you may also earn credit by watching Reservation Dogs on FX Hulu, or Rutherford Falls on Peacock. You can go to the Heard Museum. You can read the book 1491. You can figure out where our sermon title came from today. You can Venmo an Indigenous friend some coffee money. Or you can buy art from Native artists. And lastly, you can talk to a real live Indian. Just to talk, not to learn. I suggest you stay away from the guy at the bus stop whose girlfriend left him in Phoenix and now needs a ride back to AJ or something. You'd be surprised how many times I've heard that story. Many blessings to you all. Janaho.